So you might be pleased to hear that I'm not going to talk too much about the company I work for. Instead, I'm going to talk about some bigger picture stuff and some really important changes that happen in our industry. Just a quick introduction. My name is Frank. I work for Adaptly, and we provide technology and services for brands across multiple marketing platforms. We used to call it social, but now we just pretty much call it marketing. So I recently went to an industry event about native advertising, and there was some really smart guys sat on a panel, and they couldn't really agree on what native advertising was. So I think it's not surprising that there's some confusion in the industry around this at the moment. But one thing they could agree on was that it was only something which can become more significant and create exciting opportunities for brands. So it's very much front of mind at the moment. To give you guys a definition of sorts, we can say that native advertising is an online advertising method in which the advertiser attempts to gain attention by providing content in the context of the user's experience. Native ad formats match both the form and function of the user experience in which it is placed. So another way to say that might be we're talking about ads which maybe don't look and feel like ads. And in that sense, it's not a concept which is anything particularly new. If we think about content marketing or advertorials, this is something which has been around for quite a long time, but I think when we're talking about native advertising now, we're actually talking about something a little bit different. So just to start, we're going to play a little game. And I'm going to show you some creative and placement examples, and you guys can tell me whether you think this is native or not native based on this definition. So let's start with a centre page ad in a glossy magazine for DHL. So hands up if anyone thinks this is native. Anyone? Okay, a few. We've got a Facebook newsfeed ad, a promoted post for EE. Is that native? Hands up for yes. Okay, a couple. Premium logout experience on Facebook. Is that native? Is that not native? Okay. We've got the orange "Don't let a mobile phone ruin your movie" cinema sponsorship, which is a few years old now. Think about the form and function in which this content is being delivered and how it actually matches the environment in which it's being seen. Finally, we have the MSN homepage takeover. This is confused.com. Is that native? We've got promoted pin on Pinterest. We've got a sponsored update on LinkedIn. So you get the idea. There's a lot of stuff out there. Some of it we may say is totally native. Some of it's borderline, but a lot of this stuff isn't actually new. But why are we talking about native now? This is a Google trend report which shows that really in 2013 is when we started seeing an increase in people searching on Google about native advertising, and specifically looking for what native advertising examples are and native advertising definitions. So that shows that people don't really understand what it is and looking for some examples and for definitions around what native advertising is. So I think there's really two key reasons why this is something which has become front of mind and is starting to play a major part in our industry. And the first of those two reasons is there's been a shift in people's behavior. So we're talking about a social evolution, something which is probably the biggest social evolution we'll see in our lifetimes. And this is on sort of Charles Darwin type standards. It's not something which is just an online advertising thing. So something that's really, really big, a huge kind of change in the way that people do things. And that's related essentially to the smartphone and how the smartphone influences the way we do things. How we communicate with people, how we buy food, how we buy clothes, how we store our personal belongings like photos, how we order pizza, how we share our world through social media. But essentially, we're doing things very, very differently through these devices than we have done for the last 10, 20, and also hundreds and thousands of years. So since the mobile phone was invented 34 years ago, over 5 billion people have acquired one. That's 75% of the world's population. And in 2011, more people bought smartphone devices than they did personal computers. So increasingly, these are the devices people are using to access the internet rather than PCs. And even in the last year, we're seeing a seismic shift to minutes spent on mobile devices versus desktop computers. So it also makes sense that brands are also going to want to connect with people in the places where they're spending their time. So this is a huge change, a huge kind of shift, both in our industry and in people's behavior. We're talking about the last kind of 1 to 2 years. And if you think about the way that people are actually accessing the internet on their mobile devices, I'm pretty sure that every single person in this room will have a smartphone. It's not typically through web browsers. People aren't really using Safari, Chrome, and Firefox. But instead, they're spending their time on mobile applications. And the time spent in mobile applications is represented here in these circles with some popular apps here. But people are spending more time in Facebook and Instagram combined than in all those applications, than in YouTube, than in Twitter, in Snapchat, AOL, Yahoo. So more time spent in Facebook and Instagram combined than all those other leading applications. So I think that's why Facebook has become a market leader in our industry, why all of a sudden it's become so relevant, and why we're having two-day conferences to talk about Facebook marketing. So really that's the first thing. It's been this kind of like huge kind of revolution. It's been like, you know, something which has changed our world. The smartphone is the most personal and social device in history. Just to put it in context, the average smartphone today is more than 100 times faster than the Apollo computer which sent man to the moon. So that first reason is the kind of, if you like, the social evolution of the smartphone. The second reason why we're talking about native advertising is the explosion of new advertising opportunities related to that evolution. So if we think about all the companies, all the businesses that have emerged in this new ecosystem, typically mobile applications, these are all offering new advertising solutions which are non-standard in the way that digital display advertising has been standard. So thinking again about the form and function in which content is delivered in our news feeds, in our timelines, in our status updates. Really, this is commonly what we're referring to when we're talking about native advertising. So we're talking about promoted posts on Facebook, promoted tweets on Twitter, promoted pins on Pinterest, state updates on LinkedIn. This is what we're talking about when we say native advertising. And you can see from this chart there's already a really fragmented and complex landscape. So it can be quite hard to navigate, but really we're just at the beginning of this. So this is something which is only going to evolve, become more fragmented, more complex. And that can be, you know, challenging in its own right. So what does this mean for brands and marketers? Well, on the one hand, it's a huge opportunity. So there's new ways to connect with potential customers. It's exciting. So we're going to see brand new businesses start up, evolve quickly, become very, very successful in a short period of time, taking advantage of these opportunities. And the results can be really impressive. So according to Yahoo, 63% of brands feel native ads increase customer engagement with their messages. So this is something which can deliver extremely strong results in a very short space of time. But also, as I've mentioned, it can be extremely challenging. So if you think about, I guess, the existing structures, processes, partnerships that have been built based on traditional media models, based on traditional marketing and the way that people buy TV, the way that people buy outdoor, the way that people have or build and create content. There's been a huge amount of investment in that, even in online advertising. You know, think about like the measurement and tracking partners, investing in talent, hiring people into marketing teams, partnering with the right agencies. That's a huge investment, and sometimes that makes it challenging to actually adapt to something new outside of those structures. So that in itself is you know, part of the problem of this industry where we are at the moment. But Marissa Mayer, the CEO of Yahoo, was speaking at the Cannes Media Festival just today, I think, and she was talking about the importance of native and saying that if Yahoo can evolve and move on from where they were yesterday, then their clients can as well. And I think the companies that we'll see succeed in our futures are the ones that can adapt to change, embrace change, and do it quickly. So I wanted to share an example of a client we work with and talk about how they adapted to these new solutions and how they saw some really good results from doing that. So most of you will be familiar with Eurostar. They provide a high-speed train service between London and Paris. And when we first started working with Eurostar, I think they were in the same place which a lot of advertisers are still in today. And that's that they knew they should be doing something in this world of native, even in social, but they didn't really know what they should be doing. So the result of that is that they ended up promoting a few posts, promoting a few tweets, without any real kind of like strategy or objective behind that. So that's fairly common from what we see across the board in this industry, that people know they should be doing something, but they don't really know what they should be doing and how they should be doing it. So we did a lot of work with this client at the planning stage, both with the agency and the client, to understand what their business objectives were and how they're actually coordinating the rest of their marketing activities. So really, you know, their business objective is to sell tickets, to put people on trains running back and forth between London and Paris. And their marketing objective is to get people excited about Paris. So they're targeting people in the UK and getting them excited about travel to Paris, trying to increase the number of ticket sales through that method. Their target audience is ABC One outlets in London. So we worked with them really kind of, I suppose, on their biggest brand campaign of 2013. This ran at the end of last year. The campaign was called When in Paris. So the strategy which we implemented was to leverage native ad placements on Facebook and Twitter alongside a TV buy, alongside traditional media. And the KPIs were reach, frequency, video views, and engagement. The campaign had a unified hashtag across all channels, which was When in Paris. This was shown on the TV creative, also run across Facebook and Twitter, which created consistency across channels. That hashtag also created a competition entry mechanic where people could contribute their own content. They could upload their own photos, they could upload their own stories, and just by putting that hashtag on their posts or their tweets, they'll be actively contributing to the campaign and entering a competition to win tickets to Paris. This is the creative. Let me just plug in the sound here. So this is the TV ads that ran.
Maybe you could have. Maybe you go back. Maybe you go up. Down. Round and round. Maybe you go here. Or there. To this place. That place. Maybe you meet him. Perhaps then. Hopefully not him. Maybe you see this. Hear that. Eat this. Maybe you get lost. Maybe it will rain. You shelter here, and this will happen. But maybe it won't rain. Instead, you go there and fall in love with this. Stories are waiting.
There's the hashtag. So pretty cool creative. That ran on TV. Don't know if anyone saw it, but this was also the content which we then distributed in native ad placements on both Facebook and Twitter, using Facebook's new page-first video format and embedded YouTube video in a promoted tweet. The campaign was powered by Evergreen, Adaptly's content amplification tool, which optimizes the distribution based on reach. And the results of the campaign were really quite amazing. So over 20 million people saw the ad on TV. On Facebook, we reached over 5 million people at a frequency of 3. Across the board, all the kind of, I guess, like core KPIs were met, and actually we overachieved on all industry benchmarks. But for me, the biggest success of this campaign was not any kind of individual campaign statistic, but actually it was the way that Eurostar, a traditional advertiser, had actually used Facebook and Twitter and these native ad placements in a brand new way. It's the first time they did anything like this. And actually for them to actually, in their biggest brand campaign of 2013, have Facebook and Twitter as focal points of the campaign was really huge for them. And it was so successful that this is something they'll continue to do in the future. But for me, it was that whole process and the way that these platforms are now playing a role in their wider marketing strategies was really the biggest success of the campaign. So just to wrap up then, I'm just going to leave you with 4 things to remember, or really kind of 4 questions that anyone planning native advertising should ask themselves. I think these are things which if people just follow or answer these questions, then it's really hard to go wrong, because this is a new part of the industry. It can be a difficult space to navigate, but really these kind of like 4 questions are just kind of like key principles which should guide someone through this space. And really, these are the same principles you'd apply to any kind of like marketing strategy or any kind of media planning. So the first one would be, what are our objectives? And we're not talking about social objectives, we're not talking about how many fans you want, how many likes you want on a post, how many retweets you need. But we're talking about business objectives. So, how many sales are you trying to drive this year? How are you going to increase customer retention or brand loyalty? So core business objectives. And this should be the one thing that's really kind of like influences planning the most. The second thing is, who is our target audience and where are they? So this is really about which channel you're going to invest in, which platform you're going to invest in. And that should be led by where the audience is. So brands should try and communicate with audiences in the environments where they are and where they spend their time. And that's where I think Facebook has become a real market leader in our industry. And if we look at, again, like the time spent in the Facebook app on mobile compared to other applications, it's increasing where brands are going to want to communicate with their audience. How can we communicate our message? So this is really talking about the creative execution. And we've seen that native advertisements can really increase the efficiency of marketing, but they have to match the form and function to actually gain that effectiveness. So really this is the creative strategy and the creative execution, and that should be relevant to the environment in which it's been displayed. And finally, how we measure success. So for me, this is a hugely important part of the process, because unless you're accurately measuring the success of campaigns, and sometimes this involves third parties, sometimes this involves post-campaign sales analysis, but unless you can really understand the value of the channel and how it's delivering against other marketing channels, sometimes traditional media, then you're never really going to understand how you can justify future investment. So that's it from me. They're the 4 things that I'd recommend when planning native advertising. Thank you very much.